The room felt colder that night, even though Nairobi's air was heavy and warm. Clara sat at the edge of the bed, clutching the hem of her nightdress, staring at the empty side of the mattress. For years, that space had belonged to her husband, her baby daddy, her partner, the man she thought would never grow tired of her. But lately he hadn't been there. His scent was missing, his touch absent, his voice laced with irritation whenever he spoke to her. Clara, he had said earlier that evening, his tone flat like he was ordering food from a stranger, I don't think this is working anymore. You've changed. You're not the woman I married. I need someone who excites me again. Someone sexy. She swallowed hard, his words cutting deeper than any knife ever could. Changed, of course she had changed. 2 C-sections had left their marks across her stomach, proof of the life she had carried, of the children they had both prayed for. Nights of nursing, days of exhaustion, sacrifices made so their home could stand tall. Hadn't those things mattered? Didn't he see the love carved into those scars? But he didn't. His eyes wandered now, chasing curves unspoiled by motherhood, skin untouched by stretch marks. He had found someone else, a woman whose laughter was lighter, whose body hadn't known the weight of bearing children. And in his cruel honesty he had told her so. Now, sitting alone in the dim bedroom, Clara pressed her palm against her stomach, feeling the softness, the ridges of healed wounds, the stretch marks like lightning bolts drawn across her skin. She hated that she cried while touching herself, hated that she believed him. Not sexy, she whispered into the silence, her throat tight. Not his type. Her tears came hot and fast, pooling at her chin, soaking into her nightdress. She wasn't crying only for the marriage, she was crying for herself, for the woman she used to be, the girl who once stood tall, confident, certain of her beauty. Somewhere between childbirth, sacrifice, and rejection, that woman had been buried deep. But the world doesn't stop spinning when one man decides you're not enough. Life pushes forward, sometimes dragging you, sometimes lifting you. And a week later, life pushed Clara into a moment she hadn't expected. It happened at a small cafe downtown, one she'd slipped into to escape the heat and her own spiraling thoughts. She wore a loose blouse and jeans, hopping to disappear into the crowd, invisible and unnoticed. She sipped her coffee slowly, her eyes lost on the street outside, watching people laugh, couples walk hand in hand, mothers pull children along. She wondered if anyone could see through her, if they could sense that she was a woman breaking quietly behind her tired smile. "Excuse me," a warm voice interrupted, pulling her back into the present. She looked up and met a pair of eyes, deep brown, steady, curious. The man standing before her was tall, broad-shouldered, his smile disarming in its simplicity. He gestured awkwardly to the empty chair across from her. "Mind if I sit? Place is packed." She blinked, surprised. Sure." As he sat down, she noticed the small details. His rolled-up sleeves revealing strong forearms, the faint scar above his eyebrow that only added character, the way he carried himself without arrogance. He ordered tea, then turned his attention back to her. "I'm Daniel," he said. "Clara," she replied, her voice quieter than she intended. For a moment, silence hung between them, the hum of the cafe filling the gap. She thought that would be it, just small talk, strangers sharing a table. But then Daniel leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. "You look like you've got a lot on your mind," he said gently. Her instinct was to laugh it off, to deny, to hide. But his eyes held no judgment, no hint of mockery. Something about that steady gaze made her chest ache. She shrugged, looking down at her cup. "It's been a rough time." "Rough times don't last," he said simply, "but strong people do." The words weren't magic, but they sat with her, lingering, warming some small part of her that had gone cold. She managed a small smile, the first genuine one in days. Their conversation flowed more easily after that, casual at first, about work, the weather, the bustle of the city. He told her he worked in construction management, that he liked old books and late-night walks. She found herself laughing softly at his stories, surprised that she could still laugh at all. When they finally parted, Daniel stood and offered his hand. "It was nice meeting you, Clara. I hope I see you again." She hesitated before taking his hand, but when she did, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. A spark. Not the wildfire of lust she once associated with romance, but something quieter, steadier, safer. That night, as she lay in bed alone again, she thought about his eyes, his voice, his words. And for the first time since her husband's cruel confession, she drifted to sleep without tears. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel returned, as if the universe had decided Clara needed a reminder that she wasn't invisible. They met again at the cafe, then once more at a bookstore he recommended, then at Uhuru Park where they walked slowly, their conversations stretching into hours. Clara found herself telling him things she hadn't admitted even to herself, that she felt ruined by her scars, that she hated mirrors, that she feared no man would ever look at her with desire again. Daniel didn't flinch, he didn't rush to dismiss her pain. He listened, and when she finally fell silent, ashamed of the vulnerability spilling out of her, he took her hand and held it firmly. "You think scars make you less," he said quietly. "But to me, scars are proof of survival, proof of strength. They don't make you less, Clara, they make you more." Her throat closed, her eyes filled, and she had to look away. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not even her husband when their love was young. That night she stood before her mirror, blouse unbuttoned, jeans slipping off her hips, her body bared under the harsh light. She looked at the stretch marks, the lines across her stomach, the weight she carried. For the first time she didn't whisper ugly. She whispered his words instead, proof of survival, proof of strength. It would take time, healing always did. But something had shifted inside her, a seed planted by kindness, by attention, by a man who saw her not as ruined but as whole. And though she still trembled at the thought of undressing before him, she also imagined what it would feel like to be looked at, not with disgust, not with pity, but with desire, with reverence. The thought both terrified and thrilled her. Clara had never noticed how alive the city became at night until she began spending more evenings with Daniel. He seemed to know all the little places, quiet cafes with dim lights, bookshops that stayed open past midnight, rooftops where the skyline glittered like scattered jewels. Beside him, she felt both exposed and safe, a fragile mix that frightened her almost as much as it thrilled her. The fear always returned when she was alone. In her bathroom mirror, she would stare at her reflection and whisper the questions that gnawed at her. What will he think when he sees me? Will his eyes shift like my husband's did, filled with disappointment? Will he still want me once the clothes come off? Some nights she even considered pushing Daniel away before things grew deeper. It would be easier than facing that shame. Yet each time his presence pulled her back, the warmth of his hand when he guided her across a busy street, the way his laughter filled empty spaces inside her, the respect in his gaze whenever she spoke. She couldn't walk away, not now. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel invited her to his apartment for the first time. The thought of it made Clara's chest tighten with anticipation and dread. She wore a soft dress, loose enough to hide what she feared but still gentle on her curves. Her palms sweated the entire ride there, her mind racing through scenarios she wasn't sure she was ready for. When he opened the door, she found herself exhaling in relief. His place wasn't intimidating, it was warm, filled with books, framed photographs of family, and little signs of a man who valued comfort over perfection. "Welcome to my world," he said with a smile, motioning her inside. She laughed nervously. "It feels cozy." They spent the afternoon cooking together, chopping vegetables side by side, stealing glances, brushing against each other in the small kitchen. Daniel's patience struck her most. He never rushed, never forced, never let silence feel heavy. After dinner, they sat on the balcony watching the Nairobi lights flicker in the distance. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his hand brushing hers lightly, testing, waiting. Clara felt her heart slam against her ribs, the warmth spreading through her chest and settling low in her stomach. "Clara," he said softly, turning to look at her, "you know I like you, right?" Her throat tightened. She nodded, but her voice cracked when she answered, "I'm just scared." He reached for her hand, holding it gently. "Of me?" "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "Of this, of being seen, really seen." He studied her for a long moment, his expression steady, unreadable yet kind. Then he leaned closer, his forehead almost touching hers. "When I look at you, Clara, I don't see flaws. I see a woman who's strong, who's beautiful, who deserves to be loved the way she should have always been loved. You don't have to hide from me." Her breath caught. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let those words sink into her bones. But the ghosts of her husband's voice still haunted her, whispering that she was no longer enough. Daniel didn't kiss her then. Instead, he pulled her into an embrace, holding her tightly against his chest. His heartbeat thudded steady and sure, grounding her. She closed her eyes and let herself melt into the safety of his arms. That night, she went home shaken, not from fear, but from the intensity of longing she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, she wanted to believe she could be touched again without shame. The next week, she found herself standing before her closet longer than usual, debating what to wear before meeting Daniel. She tried on dress after dress, turning sideways, pulling fabric over her stomach, rejecting each one until exhaustion set in. Finally she stopped, stared at herself in the mirror and whispered his words again. Scars are proof of survival, proof of strength. When she met him that evening, she wore a simple fitted blouse and skirt, not to hide, but to show herself as she was. The way Daniel's eyes lingered on her when she arrived, the way his lips curved into a slow, admiring smile made her pulse race. "You look incredible," he said, and she believed him. Their bond deepened over the following weeks. They shared secrets in whispers, jokes in laughter, silences that spoke louder than words. And one evening, as rain poured outside, Clara found herself in Daniel's apartment again, standing by the window while thunder rolled. He moved behind her, slipping his arms around her waist, resting his chin lightly on her shoulder. She tensed at first, but his warmth soothed her, his breath gentle against her ear. "You're safe with me," he murmured. Her heart pounded as she turned to face him. Their eyes locked, and this time there was no hesitation. Daniel leaned down, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was tender yet full of unspoken hunger. Clara's knees weakened, her hands clutching at his shirt. The kiss deepened, slow and reverent until she was breathless. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers, silently asking a question. Fear and desire warred inside her. She wanted him, wanted to feel desired, wanted to reclaim the part of herself that had been buried under shame. But she was terrified of the moment when clothes would fall away. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "What if you don't like what you see?" Daniel cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to form. "Clara, I already see you, every part of you, and I've never wanted anyone more." The truth in his tone unraveled her defenses. Slowly, hesitantly, she let him guide her toward the bedroom. Each step was heavy with fear and hope, but she didn't stop. When they stood by the edge of the bed, Clara froze, her hands clutching the hem of her blouse. The old voice in her head screamed that she was ruined, unworthy, unwanted. Her chest tightened with panic. But Daniel placed his hands gently over hers, stilling them. His eyes never left hers as he whispered, "Only when you're ready, not a second before." The respect in his voice broke her. Tears spilled freely now, not of shame but of release. No man had ever given her that choice. Slowly, with trembling hands, she lifted her blouse over her head, revealing the stretch marks and the scar that curved across her stomach. Her breath hitched. She couldn't look at him, afraid of what she might see in his eyes. But then he touched her scar, gently tracing it with his fingertips, reverent as though he were touching something sacred. He bent and kissed the mark softly, then looked up at her with eyes full of longing. "Beautiful," he whispered. Clara's body shook with emotion. She had braced herself for rejection, but what she found was devotion. Daniel undressed her not with hurried hands but with patience, as though every inch of her deserved to be cherished. And for the first time in years, she felt not just seen, but adored. Their intimacy unfolded slowly that night like a delicate dance. She let go piece by piece, surrendering not just her body but her fears. And in the warmth of Daniel's arms, Clara discovered a truth she had long forgotten. She was worthy of love, worthy of desire, worthy of being cherished exactly as she was. The morning after their first night together, Clara woke with her head resting on Daniel's chest, the steady rise and fall of his breathing lulling her back into safety. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, casting soft patterns across the room. For a moment she lay still, afraid to move, afraid to discover that the tenderness of last night had been a dream. But then his arms tightened around her as though he sensed her stirring, and his lips brushed against her hair. "Good morning," he whispered, his voice still husky from sleep. Tears strung her eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming realization that this was real. He had seen her, all of her, the scars, the softness, the parts of her she thought unlovable, and instead of pulling away, he had drawn closer. She tilted her head to look at him, her voice trembling. "Aren't you disappointed?" Daniel frowned, confusion shadowing his features. "Disappointed, Clara, last night was everything, your everything." Her heart clenched. She pressed her face against his chest to hide the tears slipping down her cheeks. For so long, she had believed the lie that her worth ended where her scars began. But Daniel's words, his touch, his reverence, cracked that lie wide open. Over the weeks that followed, Clara noticed the change inside herself. Where she once avoided mirrors, she now paused, touching her scars with a softer gaze. Where she once dressed to hide, she now wore colors and cuts that made her feel alive. She no longer whispered insults to herself, she whispered truths. "I am strong. I am beautiful. I am enough." Daniel fueled that transformation not by saving her, but by standing beside her as she saved herself. He encouraged her when she spoke about her dreams, listened when she confessed her fears, and celebrated even the smallest victories, like the first time she wore a fitted dress in public without feeling ashamed. One evening, as they strolled through Uhuru Park, Daniel stopped beneath a jacaranda tree, the purple blossoms scattered around them like confetti. He held her hands, his eyes warm and steady. "You know," he said, his voice low, "I don't just want to be the man who shows you your worth. I want to be the man who builds a life with you, who reminds you every day how much you mean." Clara's breath caught. The weight of his words sank deep into her bones. She thought of the man who had left her, who had broken her with his cruelty. And then she thought of Daniel, who pieced her back together not by pretending the cracks didn't exist, but by cherishing them. She smiled through her tears. "I never thought I'd get a second chance at this, at love." Daniel leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. "You didn't just get a second chance, Clara, you got the love you were always meant to have." Their kiss beneath the falling blossoms felt like a vow unspoken, yet eternal. As weeks turned into months, Clara's transformation became undeniable. She carried herself with a confidence she hadn't felt in years, her laughter returning, her eyes brighter. Even her children noticed, giggling when they saw her humming around the kitchen, teasing her when Daniel visited and brought flowers. One night after the children had gone to sleep, Clara stood before the mirror in her bedroom. She wore nothing but a silk robe, loosely tied at the waist. She let it slip open, revealing the stretch marks, the soft curves, the scar that once made her shrink away. This time she didn't look with dread. She looked with pride. These marks carried life, she thought. They carried love, they carried me. When Daniel entered the room, she didn't rush to cover herself. Instead, she turned toward him, her robe falling away completely. His eyes widened, darkening with desire, but more than that, with reverence. "You're breathtaking," he whispered, his voice thick. Clara stepped forward, closing the distance between them. She placed his hands on her waist, gidding him to feel the softness she had once been ashamed of. "This is me," she said, her voice steady. "All of me, and I'm not hiding anymore." The hunger in his gaze sent shivers through her, but beneath it was something deeper. Love, devotion, awe. He kissed her with a fire that stole her breath, his hands mapping every inch of her body as though committing it to memory. That night their intimacy was different. It wasn't just about passion, though it was fierce and consuming. It was about freedom, Clara's freedom to be vulnerable, to be raw, to be seen and still adored. She surrendered completely, not from fear but from trust. Afterward, as they lay tangled in sheets, Clara rested her head against his shoulder, her heart calm yet full. "I used to think no one would ever want me again," she admitted softly. "But now I know better, I know I'm worthy." Daniel kissed her forehead. "You were always worthy, you just needed someone who never let you forget it." Clara smiled, closing her eyes. For the first time in years she felt whole, not because a man completed her, but because she had found herself again. Daniel was not her savior, he was her partner, her equal, her mirror reflecting back the truth she had always carried. The scars no longer defined her shame, they defined her strength. And in Daniel's arms, Clara discovered the kind of love that doesn't fade when bodies change, when time leaves its marks. It was a love rooted deeper, blooming brighter, a love that made her believe that second chances